Hi everyone. So my name's Tamara and I work for the Blue Knot Foundation, and my role there is really to look after the education and training side of things, as well as some of the marketing, but also part of kind of making decisions around the organisational structure of Blue Knot and how we can remain trauma informed. So building a trauma-informed community is really around awareness. So very often there are people in the community who have all experienced trauma in different forms, but that trauma is really a possibility for anyone. So it's really having an awareness of the impacts of trauma and also the types of trauma. So complex trauma, which is a long-term interpersonal experience of trauma. So things such as childhood abuse, or in adulthood, domestic and family violence. So it is really important for us to have an awareness of impacts of complex trauma, so we can then understand and provide compassion, be curious, and to really promote healing and recovery within our communities. I think what's really important to understand is that trauma or complex trauma occurs in relationships. So it's really important that we understand that it can be healed in relationship. So part of that is, how do we start to create opportunities for people to rebuild their neural pathways so that they have a different experience of relationship. So very often people have experienced fear or shame or a power imbalance, and so therefore when visiting a health professional or a therapist or any other service, people can often carry those experiences with them. So it's really important that we're aware of that, but also then how we can, really start to understand what has happened for people. So each individual has their own experiences of trauma. And so rather than, I suppose, thinking about or asking the questions, what is wrong with you, we look at what has happened for you. So we don't want to be re-traumatizing people, but we also want to acknowledge that each person has their own individual experience, and that has led them to where they are today. So I think in terms of the importance of relationship, which I think was your question at the beginning, it is imperative. And I think there's a number of things that we can do. So part of that is being aware of your own response as well when you're working with others, because very often you may also have had your own trauma experiences when working with other people. And so how have you supported yourself, or have the right supports, so that when you're in a situation with someone supporting them or working with them, that you're able to regulate yourself and then support the other person to co-regulate if required. So that's a really important part, being present. So very often, people haven't had the experience of, or feel like they're not seen or heard. Therefore, it's really important for presence, because then that starts to build trust when people feel they're being heard and listened to. I'd probably also say sharing power. So giving choice to people is really important. So making choices with them, giving them all the information is really important as well. And also, I suppose, just being aware in the moment of your own responses as they come up, and how you can process those in the moment as opposed to giving them to somebody else in that situation. So awareness of trauma and its impact, and also awareness of our own responses to that. I think then what we need to look at is regulation. So how do we regulate ourselves and regulate, or if you need to help co-regulate somebody that you're working with. I think trauma sits in the body, so it's really important to understand that as well, that not everything is a conscious response. So you may be in a situation with someone where their fight, flight, freeze, faint response kicks in. And so essentially what that is that people hold their survival responses in what's called the amygdala at the base of the brain. And so if you're in a conversation with somebody and they're not using the executive functioning, very often they're not hearing or they're not processing what's being said in that moment. So it's really important. Regulation is a really important thing for people before you start to try and do any kind of processing work with them or conversations around things. So that's kind of the basic foundational work that we do in terms of education. But also, I suppose, alongside that is trauma sensitivity and trauma responsiveness. So how you're doing that in a way where you're using sensitive language, you're being compassionate, you're being empathetic, you're being curious. So it comes back to the relationship and how you're utilising the relationship and building that trust and rapport, but also pacing. So we talk a lot about pacing and safety. So in terms of safety, what we think might be safe for us may not be safe for somebody else. So we may have thought we've created, a really safe environment, but for that individual, there is something within that environment that makes them feel unsafe. So asking the right questions, what do you need in this moment? How can I best support you? Are always really good things to ask, but essentially that person is going to have a response in the relationship and in their environment, so it becomes an ecosystem of responses that we then need to manage. So things like setting up the environment in the right way is also really important. We do a process called a walkthrough, where we ask people to walk through their service or walk through a process and really put themselves in the shoes of the user to kind of say, okay, well, how do I experience walking in the door, talking to the person at the front desk? What do the rooms feel like? Is there a safe exit? All of those kind of things, which kind of move a bit more into trauma-informed design. But all of these things are really important for people to start to create their own sense or felt sense of safety in that space.